Morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So thanks to all of you for being here. I want to thank my colleagues for standing with me this morning. We're gathered to lend our voices to support a legislative solution for DACA beneficiaries before the end of this year. The young people covered by DACA need the stability of a legislative solution that can only be provided by Congress, and that's what our President Trump, has asked us to do. As we have seen, temporary executive orders that can be reversed leave these young people in uncertainty, facing broken promises. Congress must enact legislation, protection for dreamers, because the lives of nearly 800,000 young people who came to this country as children and have lived here for most all of their lives are hanging in the balance. In my home state of Washington, there are over 17,000 of these individuals that we call dreamers. I have sat down and visited with many of them. In fact, in my district, over 1/3 of those 17,000 reside. And I gotta tell you, their personal stories are compelling. I believe that our borders must be secured and our laws must be upheld, but we must also understand that these young people grew up in America, they live here, and this is the only life that they know. By winding down DACA, President Trump may have intended to give Congress 6 months to pass legislation. But the reality is that these young people with DACA status are already being harmed today. According to the Department of Homeland Security, over 22,000 DACA individuals were unable to meet the October 5th deadline to renew their status, which means that even before the March 5th deadline, over 20,000 individuals will have lost their DACA status. And when they lose that status, these young people can lose their jobs, certainly their driver's licenses. It's a precarious situation. That is happening right now. So that every day that Congress fails to act, every time that Congress kicks this can down the road, real people are hurt. So we as members of Congress, we recognize the positive contributions that dreamers have made to the social and the economic well-being of the United States. I can tell you that almost every single Republican agrees it's the responsibility of Congress, not the administration, to make immigration law. Now we must all act to provide dreamers with certainty and a real, lasting solution. Now, a number of us may have introduced or co-sponsored separate bills, but I am grateful to be joined by my Republican colleagues here this morning to raise our voices in support of a legislative solution for these DACA beneficiaries. We need a solution that gets 218 votes in the House and 60 votes in the Senate, or there's no deal. No bill is going to be perfect, but inaction is just not acceptable. So we stand here ready to work with the Speaker's Working Group, with the White House, with our friends from both sides of the aisle to pass a legislative solution this year. And with that, I'm very proud to introduce my very good friend from the state of Florida, Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. El Señor Casanueva, Newhouse. So what an honor it is to be standing here along with my Republican colleagues in support of any common sense legislation that's going to help the dreamers to be able to realize their dreams. This is their home. This is where they've grown up. This is the language they speak. And to tear them apart from this land that they love would just be heartless. And I know that sometimes in the press you read about, the Republicans don't want to help young people to realize their dreams. Well, here you have living proof of why that is not true. There's a whole bunch of us who want to make this dream a reality, and I stand ready to work alongside them. Para mí es un honor y un placer estar aquí con mis colegas para decir que nosotros los republicanos sí queremos ayudar a los soñadores queremos que ellos puedan realizar ese sueño. Los Estados Unidos es su casa, el inglés es su idioma. Deportarlos a una vida que ellos ni conocen sería cruel y no en los intereses de este gran país. Así que muchísimas gracias a mis colegas. Thank you, Dan, for doing this.
And we all respond by saying, sí.
Sí. Joe Barton, oh my gosh, Joe Barton, Texas has a huge Republican coalition there in the state, and Joe's been the leader in this fight, and I know he's going to bring us more Texans aboard. So, Joe, go to it.
Ileana's just amazed that I'm doing something before 10 o'clock in the morning. Not an early morning person. As Ileana indicated, Texas is home to the first or second most number of DACA individuals. They are all over my congressional district. In Ennis, Texas, Arlington, Texas, Mansfield, Texas, Waxahachie, Texas, Corsicana, Texas. It's very important that we realize that the DACA group came to the United States as children. Some of them have been here over 20 years. They've been educated here. They in many cases are going to college now, working here. It's just common sense, if you do what's in the best interest of the United States, to allow the DACA students to stay in the United States and earn a path first to legal status and then a path to citizenship if they so choose. I'm on two bills, the Republican bill, and I'm also on the bipartisan bill. There are not too many major differences in the two bills, but what is important is that one way or the other we legislatively move one of those bills, or perhaps another bill, in the next, well, we'd like to do it by the end of this calendar year, but certainly within the 6-month window that President Trump gave us when he rescinded the executive order, which he should have done. President Obama did act unconstitutionally, and I think it's important now that the Congress do its constitutional duty. So I'm proud to be here with all my colleagues, and has already been pointed out, to show that this is not a Democrat initiative. It's a bipartisan initiative, and when the bill comes to the floor, whatever bill it is, I predict it'll have a huge vote with well over 300 votes to send this bill to the Senate. So I'm now supposed to introduce my good friend from the great state of Michigan, like me, the former chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Fred Upton.
Thank you, Joe. I'm glad you used the word great.
I'm in a good mood.
Yeah, I know. We got to get this thing done. We got to get it done. The president gave us a challenge. And rightly so, he said we're going to get rid of some of these executive orders, so we need a legislative solution, and that's what we are committed to do. I've sat down with a good number of my DACA dreamer people, good people, a whole number of times over the last year or two. They want certainty in this process too. They're worried when they go home. They're worried about their job. They're worried about finishing school. They wonder what is going to happen next. That's not the life that they ought to have here. And that's why we need to act before the end of the year to give them that certainty, to be able to work together. I've had some discussions already this morning, but the last couple of weeks with both Republicans and Democrats to try and get the job done. So let's take up the president's challenge. Let's get it done. Let's get a bill to his desk that he can sign and say Merry Christmas to a lot of folks across the country. And I now introduce my good friend Don Bacon from the state of Nebraska.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm from the 2nd District in the Omaha area and the surrounding suburbs. I was a newcomer, challenger last year, running against an incumbent. And to win and defeat an incumbent, you got to work 14-hour days, do 5, 6, 7 events a day. And I did that for a year and a half. And I got the message loud and clear from the far majority of our district. Can't say 100%, I think the far majority share these sentiments. I heard two things. First, fix the problem. We had 300,000 to 400,000 folks coming here illegally a year. Our folks want that fixed. They want a visa system upgraded. 40% of the folks that come here legally through the visa system that stay illegally. We got to find a way to get visa compliance, and we need some kind of employer enforcement. I heard that over and over. Don, you got to fix the problem. But I also heard over and over that we need to find a compassionate way forward for the DACA youth who are here. Folks who only know this country is theirs. They don't know any other country, the ones I've talked to. Most of them came here at 2 and 3 years old, the ones I chatted with. So I heard that loud and clear, and we need to do both. Now, I've met with about 300 DACA youth in our local area, and some of the most impressive young men and women you'd ever meet. One young man, he already has his own clothing line in his own store, 17-year-old. Another young guy was showing me how he's going to fix the Bitcoin to make it more cyber secure. Another, a kid who came here at 3 years old, 17 years old. I met a young woman. She's was 17 as well. Wants to be a professional dancer. She's already danced in front of a crowd of 50,000 in Louisiana, and she's accepted at New York University. Fortunately, I hear some heartbreaking stories of a young man that he said he's been afraid his whole life to be pulled over with a broken taillight because he'd be deported. He wouldn't even know where he's being deported to because he's only known this country. So we have to have a commitment to do both. And I think that we can do that in this House. This is a tailor-made problem for bipartisan fix. Securing our borders, upgrading the visa system, employer enforcement, combination thereof of some type, and finding a permanent way forward for our DACA youth so they never have to worry about being deported again. And I know this House can do it, this Congress can, and the President gave us the task, and we'll do it. And I'm proud to stand up here with these ladies and gentlemen and work in that effort. And with that, I'd like to introduce Congressman King from New York.
Thank you, Don. Backstage, I was wondering what Don was going to say. He heard he had introduced me, and he couldn't have anything good to say. Thank you.
I had a couple of options, but it's something nice.
Seriously, I want to thank Dan Newhouse for really bringing everyone together here today. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. It's an American issue, and it's an issue that should really be kept separate from so much of the partisanship that's on Capitol Hill. This is an issue we have to resolve. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about innocent people who are, through no fault of their own, through no decision of their own, they're here in a very precarious position. So we have the obligation, not just the opportunity, the obligation to rectify this, working together, showing the American people that Congress can work, that we can get something done, and get something done which really helps so many good people. So I think we should get it done as quickly as possible, not get caught up in partisan disputes here or there. This is not part of the overall immigration issue. I don't see that at all. I believe in strong borders. I believe in strengthening E-Verify system. I'd be considered tough as far as border security is concerned. When you're talking about young people who know no country other than the United States as being their own, we have to stand with them. And I saw the statement today by former Defense Secretary Gates saying what an integral part of U.S. Armed Forces DACA is. And so let's not undermine our armed forces. I also hear from many business people in my community how important it is. So it's not just a humanitarian issue. It's a military issue. It's an economic issue. It's an American issue. So let's get the job done. Thank you, Dan. And I'm now privileged to introduce from Pennsylvania, Ryan Costello. Ryan?
Thank you, and I think we're about at that point in the program where anything I say has probably been said already by my colleagues, but I do wish to associate my comments and my feelings on the issue with virtually everything that has already been said. We in Congress need to provide a humane, permanent, and constitutional solution to this issue. It is not something that can just be done by a president. It does require Congress to step up and legislate, and to do so in a way that reflects the best about our country, which is that we are a compassionate people. And when you look at DACA children, many born here want to be, many having known America as the only country and viewing themselves as American. And we owe it, I think, to the American people to demonstrate that we can do this on a bipartisan basis. And candidly, I would add this: let's not wait until 5 months and 30 days. Let's do this earlier rather than later, and let's demonstrate that we can work together and that we're doing this for the right reasons. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman Susan Brooks.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, and thank you, Dan, for organizing this really important gathering today. I think to show the country, to show our colleagues that Republicans do want a compassionate solution to this problem. The DACA beneficiaries need the stability, as you've heard, a legislative solution, and the sooner the better. I've also, like my colleagues, met with numerous DACA recipients, and these young people, I represent Indianapolis and to the north. These young people are contributing in significant ways to our communities. I met with Gabby, a young woman working her way through college right now. Anna, who lives in Indianapolis, working in a bank. She's also putting herself through college. A young woman who's working as a paralegal in an immigration law firm, who's providing information and help to her fellow DACA recipients. Leo, a senior in high school, trying to figure out his path forward. And we have to remember that these young people have grown up in our schools with our children. They have been a part of our communities for a long, long time. They've pledged allegiance to our flag, and they are a part of this country. My constituents also say we need to fix this problem, and we need to fix it quickly in a bipartisan way. So these young people deserve our support. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues here today and just urge all of us to come together on this as quickly as possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Brian Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning, everybody, and kudos to Dan Newhouse for taking the initiative to pull us all together. We are a nation of laws, and we are a nation of compassion, and they are and must not be mutually exclusive concepts. The average dreamer came to this country at the age of 6 and are now 26. That's the average. They speak English and are as culturally American as any native-born citizen. Dreamers are already contributing to our communities. They're going to school. They're part of our churches, our communities, and our country. They serve in our military. They are teachers, they're nurses, they're engineers. Many dreamers were among the Hurricane Harvey first responders, including EMTs and response organizers. And DACA recipient Alonzo Gillen, a rescue volunteer, died while trying to save his fellow Texans stranded in the high waters. It is incumbent upon Congress to get this done, to protect these children, and that we will do. And I want to thank Dan for really pulling this all together. And with that, I will introduce my friend and colleague from New York, Mr. Fessel.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Dan, for bringing us together today. I associate myself with the remarks of my colleagues. I represent a district in the Hudson Valley and Catskills of upstate New York. I've met with many DACA recipients, and I can tell you they are as American as apple pie. And it's incumbent upon Congress to fix this problem. There is great consternation and anxiety among the DACA recipients that I have spoken to. They're worried about what their future will be. They're worried whether or not they'll be subject to deportation after March. They worry about all of these things. It is time for Congress to act. There are some on the left who frankly don't want a solution because they just want the issue, and there are some on the right, similarly, who just want the issue and don't want a solution. I think there's a broad bipartisan, more than 300-member majority in this House of Representatives that would pass a reasonable DACA fix today, and it's incumbent upon the Congress to act. I'm glad that we have a working group that's working towards this, but it's vital that we act, and we should act sooner rather than later. And with that, I am pleased to turn it over to, let's see, Dave Reicher is not here, to Darrell Issa.
See what happens when Dave doesn't show up, you get me. And Eric will be next. But the reason people are standing beside me and have spoken already is that it is time for people to come to the middle in a way that was previously said hasn't always been the case. And I think the important message that I'd like to leave, having, like many of my colleagues, sat down with various people who are in the DACA position, is now they're not all scientists. They didn't all graduate first in their high school class, not with the amount of DACA kids in each high school class in my district. But in fact, they do follow a category that I think long ago should have been dealt with, and dealt with compassionately, as my colleagues have said. So the question really is not what each of us is saying today, because you wouldn't be here seeing us standing here if we weren't willing to come to a middle position. The question is, will you judge 435 members of the House and at least some of the 100 members of the Senate for their willingness to get off of the status quo that for at least the 17 years that I've served here has caused nothing to happen? Nothing to happen in the ag jobs area, nothing to happen in any of the high-tech or other guest worker programs, nothing to happen in any area except a small amount of, quote, enforcement after 9/11. So I would ask that if the press is looking, don't judge us for being here. Ask the question of 435 members of the House, where are you? Are you willing to get off of the enforcement first, and are you willing to get off of the all or nothing? Because both are signs of people who are not willing to stand with the rest of us here today and make a difference in these young people's lives, a difference that has been overdue for at least the 17 years that I've served here.
And Eric, you do have a challenge. You have to wrap this all into the tax bill you're working on
so that we can get it done and get it done right away. Eric.
Oh, good morning, Eric Paulson from Minnesota. I will just quickly say, for the 6,000 folks that are in the DACA category in Minnesota, this is about helping from a compassionate perspective and also from a talent pool, folks that have grown up in an area that America is the only country they know. And so for all practical purposes, they are Americans. And there is a governing majority, I believe, in the House and in the Senate that can see this issue come to pass to fruition successfully and make progress on other immigration issues as well, as Mr. Ice had mentioned. So with that, I will thank Dan for bringing us together and introduce Carlos Cabello from Florida.
Thank you very much to Dan Newhouse and to all of these wonderful colleagues for this strong show of support for these young immigrants who, of course, we all know were brought to this country. Many of them have no memory of their countries of origin. They all speak English. They love this country just as much as we do. And that's why in our bill, and many of my colleagues here are co-sponsors, we say recognizing America's children, because we think that it's the law that has to catch up to these young immigrants and recognize them for who they are. People who are Americans, who love this country, as Susan Brooks said so eloquently, who pledge allegiance to our flag, who want to serve this country and are already contributing greatly to our wonderful country. So I stand with all of these colleagues to say we reject the all or none approach. And we know there are members of this House who are saying it has to be either this way or we do nothing. We reject that. We reject that because we think there is a compromise out there that can secure the future for all of these wonderful young people, and that can also keep our country safe and make sure that we have border integrity and border security. So that compromise is out there, and all of these colleagues are willing to come to the table, and as a matter of fact have been all throughout this 115th Congress and many of us before, to try to find that solution. So I'm very grateful to all of them, and I'll say a couple words in Spanish. Quiero agradecerle al representante Newhouse del estado de Washington y a todos mis colegas su presencia aquí hoy y sus esfuerzos a favor de los Dreamers, estos jóvenes inmigrantes que fueron traídos a este país, que estudiaron en este país, se han criado en este país, hablan inglés, están aportando a este gran país. Hoy enviamos el mensaje que habemos muchos republicanos en la Cámara, también en el Senado, que queremos hacer todo lo posible para lograr una solución permanente, para asegurarle el futuro a estos jóvenes en nuestro país, y que vamos a trabajar arduamente, intensamente, hasta que lo logremos. La meta personal mía, lo que yo quisiera ver es que antes de fin de año se resuelva esta situación. Sería un gran regalo no solo para los Dreamers, sino también para todo el pueblo de Estados Unidos, porque creo que va a ser un momento muy especial, una gran celebración. Muchas gracias. Our colleague from New Jersey, Leonard Lance.
The only language I took in high school was Latin, ladies and gentlemen. don't remember a word of it. The best public policy on any issue is from the center out. And Carlos's proposal recognizes that. And this should not be a political football. And it's the responsibility of colleagues on both sides of the aisle to come to the table to make sure this issue is addressed within a timely fashion, the 6-month period, now several months in the past, incidentally. Ronald Reagan is the father of the modern Republican Party. And the last time we had immigration reform in this country was under President Reagan. And that was a compromise. And all of us in Congress today, I think, look to the legacy of Ronald Reagan. And so let's look to that legacy and let's make sure moving forward that we're able to produce results. It's clear that the American people want results, and it's clear that the American people want results on this issue. And I am confident that we will be able to do this under the leadership of my distinguished colleagues. And time is of the essence, and I am convinced there is a solution, and that solution should occur as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. Members from west to east, north to south, a diverse group of Republicans in the House of Representatives, all expressing the desire to get this, find a solution, a lasting solution for the dreamers, the DACA individuals in our country, determined to work with anyone who has a solution to come forward and get this done. So with that, if there's any questions in the room, we'd be happy to try to answer in the few minutes we have remaining. I think you were first.
Thank you, sir. Well, sort of a two-parter. Do we take away from here that the RAC Act is your preferred vehicle, and whichever your preferred vehicle is, what's the strategy to get it on the House floor?
So our preferred vehicle is the one that can garner 218 votes in the House and 60 in the Senate, and that's what we're going to work toward. There's one of our colleagues, I think Mr. Barton, said there's not a lot of difference between some of these bills, and we're working very hard to find common ground to get that key number of votes, 218, 60, and 1. And whatever we'll do, that's what we're going to put our energy behind.
And the second part, how do you get it on the House floor? Is a discharge petition maybe a safety valve for the Speaker?
You know, there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm thinking that, the Speaker has put together a working group to try to come up with that sweet spot of balance, that we can find support from enough members on our side that I think we can bring together with the Democrats. There's a lot of options to do this, but I really think that if we can come up with this compromise bill, that it garners that 218, that's exactly
You
what
don't need a discharge petition. I mean, the president's given us 6 months. It'll take one presidential tweet, and we'll get the bill up.
Okay. There you go. Let's go with you next.
The DREAM Act already has 200 co-sponsors. Most people, except for Congressman Barton, not on this stage. Are any of you guys planning to sign on to that bill to kind of push that forward and get it closer to 218, and why not if so?
Well, I've been asked that a lot, and what I can tell you is, and I can't speak for all my colleagues, but in my mind, we have really just one shot at this. The president has indicated that he is not in favor of a clean DREAM Act. And so I don't know that it's to our advantage to take our time to pass something that would fall under that category of clean, to have to see that it vetoed. We want to make sure that whatever we do in this one shot we have is able to be successful in both chambers and the White House. And the reason is, and it was expressed very clearly, I think, here today, we're talking about people's lives, the individuals who are being affected right now by the actions that we haven't taken yet. And so we have to get this right. And so whatever it is that gets us successful, that's exactly what we want to do.
Let me add to that.
Sure,
If
absolutely.
I can add to that. What I would ask all of our colleagues, the important thing to do is, and look, I'm for finding a way to resolve the issue of the 11 million today. I would vote for that solution today, but I think we need to focus on who it is we need to most immediately help. And there are about 800,000 young people who are at risk of losing something, a protection, which is their lives essentially for most of these young people, and they're at risk. So that's why in crafting our legislation, and in the case of recognizing America's children, it is a little more expansive. It's more generous than DACA, but we wanted to, as much as possible, keep the spotlight, the focus on what I think is the main goal, which is to make sure that these 800,000 not only don't lose their existing protections, but are guaranteed the rest of their lives here in our country. So I have said, and I'm not speaking for anyone else here, I would vote, I think, for any of the bills that are out there today, both in the Senate and the House, that would resolve this issue. But I think we also have to be realistic. What's achievable given the dynamics here in the Congress, and how expansive do we want to be? The more expansive we get, the less likely it is that something will happen. So a lot of our colleagues are saying, well, it's this or nothing, and that's not really fair to these young people, because we shouldn't have that all or nothing approach, because in my view, nothing is not an option.
I think we have time for one more question. I think you were.
So Congressman Martin said, he noted, and you all have expressed openness to sort of any DACA solution itself that gets across the line. So if the details of the DACA solution itself aren't the ones that matter, the working group is looking for the border security solution. Conservatives have thrown out chain migration, that's part of the Tillis bill in the Senate. Are the other parts of the compromise the sticking points? And all due respect, but none of the members on the stage today are part of that working group. Do you guys have any sense of where they're headed on these sort of the other issues that have to be attached to the DACA solution to get it across the line?
So yeah, I was invited to one of these meetings, and by the way, there are a number of different groups that are working this issue. I'm also part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. We're working on a potential compromise. I'm trying to get in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to work with my colleagues there on a potential compromise. That has taken a long time. I hope that gets resolved soon, favorably. So there are many different groups. I think you're going to see a number of different ideas emerge. People are going to take a crack at a compromise. We know in the Senate there's also a bipartisan conversation. Senator Schumer confirmed this to me yesterday. So there are going to be a lot of different options, and I just suggest we all remain open-minded and try to choose the best one.
And one of the reasons that none of the members of the working group are here, because we wanted to demonstrate that this isn't your usual cast of characters for the most part. There are a lot of people that represent interests that you don't always hear about as it relates to the immigration or the DACA issue.
And some voices in this, Republicans in the Senate have talked about dealing with this issue next year, not this year.
Our interest here is moving as quickly as possible. We would like to get a solution by the end of the year. Like we said, there are a lot of people at risk even today. And so we think it's incumbent upon us to move as quickly as possible. But thank you very much this morning. I appreciate you all coming and your interest in this very important issue. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Gracias.